This story reflects the real battle that many face with depression. How it begins, how it affects life, and the steps needed to fight it. While the journey can be difficult and filled with setbacks, hope and recovery are possible. Reaching out for help, being kind to yourself, and taking things one step at a time are crucial in the fight against depression. The silent battle of Rehan's struggle against depression. Rehan had always been the life of the party. Growing up, he was the friend everyone relied on, the one who could always make others laugh, and the person who seemed to have everything figured out. He was popular at school, excelled at his job, and had a close-knit circle of friends and family. To the world, Rehan appeared to be someone who had it all. But deep inside, a storm was brewing. It started small, just a subtle sense of unease in his chest, an occasional sadness he couldn't quite explain. Rehan pushed it aside, convinced it was just stress from work or perhaps a temporary feeling of loneliness. He was busy with work, keeping up with social events, and trying to maintain the image of someone who had it all together. However, over time, the unease grew stronger. Rehan began to feel more tired, even after getting plenty of sleep. His usual interests, like going for a jog or spending time with friends, started to feel like chores. He no longer felt excited about things that once brought him joy. It felt as though the world around him was fading into a gray, dull haze. The weight of it all became harder to ignore. He tried to push through it. He would tell himself, "It's just a phase. I'll snap out of it." But the days went by, and the darkness continued to creep in. Rehan started to isolate himself from friends and family, unable to explain why he felt so distant, even when he was surrounded by people who cared for him. Social gatherings that used to bring him energy now drained him, and he struggled to find the motivation to go through the motions of his everyday life. His thoughts grew darker. Rehan began to question his worth. What's the point of all this? He would think, I'm just a burden on everyone. Even the simplest tasks felt overwhelming, like getting out of bed or brushing his teeth. He no longer found joy in the things he used to love. Rehan's sleep patterns became erratic. Sometimes he couldn't sleep at all, and other times, he slept for hours, escaping into a dreamlike state to avoid facing reality. One day, Rehan's closest friend, Reena, noticed the changes. She had seen him struggle for a while but had assumed it was just temporary. However, the person sitting before her now seemed like a shadow of the Rehan she knew. He was quieter, withdrawn, and his eyes no longer held the spark they once did. She gently asked him, "Rehan, what's going on? You haven't seemed like yourself lately." At first, Rehan shrugged it off, unable to find the words to explain the darkness he felt inside. But Reena didn't give up. She told him, "It's okay if you're not okay. But you don't have to face this alone." Rehan realized in that moment how much he had been hiding and how lonely he had become in his own struggles. Reena encouraged him to seek professional help. The beginning of recovery. It was difficult for Rehan to admit that something was wrong. He had always prided himself on being strong, and the idea of asking for help felt like a sign of weakness. But after much encouragement from Reena and his family, Rehan took the brave step of visiting a therapist. At first, therapy felt uncomfortable. He didn't know how to open up, and the emotions that came rushing out felt foreign and overwhelming. But as he continued to go, Rehan began to understand that what he was going through wasn't his fault. He wasn't weak or broken. He was simply experiencing depression, something that many people go through but few openly talk about. His therapist helped him understand that depression isn't just about feeling sad. It's a complex mix of feelings, thoughts, and physical changes in the brain. Rehan learned that depression can make everything feel heavy, even the things that once seemed easy. It wasn't a sign of personal failure, but rather a mental health condition that could be treated. How life goes with depression. Rehan learned that living with depression meant having good days and bad days. Some days, he felt like he could take on the world, but on other days, even getting out of bed felt like a monumental task. Depression made everything feel like it required more effort. Eating, socializing, working, everything felt harder than it used to. The thoughts that ran through Rehan's head on dark days were harsh. He often felt like he was never good enough, even though his friends and family never made him feel that way. The self-criticism was relentless. He began to question his worth and value, convinced that others were better off without him. These negative thoughts played on a loop in his mind, making it difficult to see the world in any other way. Despite the challenges, Rehan began to take small steps toward healing. His therapist taught him coping strategies to manage his depression, such as mindfulness, journaling, and grounding exercises. He learned to focus on the present moment rather than drowning in thoughts of the past or future. Rehan also learned to set small, achievable goals, like taking a short walk or cooking a simple meal, and celebrate those victories, no matter how small they seemed. He also began to incorporate physical activity back into his routine, something he had loved before but had abandoned. Exercise, he learned, was a powerful tool in fighting depression, as it releases endorphins and helps improve mood. Slowly, he started to feel a little lighter, though the journey was far from over. Fighting depression. A long road. Recovery from depression isn't linear. Rehan faced setbacks. There were days when the cloud of sadness returned, heavier than before. There were times when Rehan felt like giving up, like it wasn't worth the effort. But with time, he came to realize that healing didn't mean being cured. It meant learning to live with his depression in a healthier way. Rehan's support system became crucial. His friends and family were there for him, but he had to lean on them more than ever. Asking for help, which had once felt like a weakness, became a vital tool in his recovery. He learned that reaching out for support was one of the strongest things a person could do when struggling with mental health. One of the most important lessons Rehan learned was to be kind to himself. He had spent so much time blaming himself for feeling the way he did, but he began to realize that self-compassion was key to his recovery. He stopped trying to fix himself and instead focused on accepting where he was in the moment. The light at the end of the tunnel. With time, Rehan found that the darkness began to lift. It didn't disappear completely, but it became easier to manage. He started to find joy in simple things again, like a good book, a walk in the park, or a meaningful conversation with a friend. Rehan still had bad days, but he had learned the tools to cope with them. Rehan's journey with depression didn't define him, but it shaped him in important ways. He became an advocate for mental health, using his story to help others who were struggling. He spoke openly about his experiences, encouraging others to seek help and be kind to themselves. Though the fight with depression is ongoing, Rehan knows that he isn't alone. He has learned that recovery is possible, and while the road is long, it is worth traveling.